This video will walk you through stitching the crow and the snake. This kit uses just 3 stitches: satin stitch, chain stitch, and running stitch. I'm going to start by showing you how to stitch the border. The border is always the area I would start a kit, as it gives you a nice long run of repeat stitches to get your hand in and get a feel for what you're doing. So the border uses satin stitch and chain stitch. We're going to start here by stitching the satin stitch. So you can see here that I'm splitting down the thread, as we'll be stitching this whole piece just using 4 strands. There is a separate video in the how-to section showing you how to split the threads, thread the needle. So do take a look at that just to see it in more detail. So once I've got my needle threaded with 4 strands, I'm going to start stitching. And first I'm going to be stitching these leaf shapes. Now the key thing when stitching shapes like this is always try and stitch them over the shortest distance of stitches. So here you see I'm stitching the narrow width of the leaf rather than long stitches going down the length. And that just enables you to have more stitches to be able to achieve the shape. So you can see in more detail here the stitching I'm doing. Now the key thing is just always stitch slightly beyond the line. You want to cover over all that white print mark, because once you've finished your piece, you don't want someone else to be able to know that you stitched it from a kit. You want it to be able to look like you just stitched it yourself. Really don't worry about how neat you're finding these look. You can always go back at the end and add a few stitches over the top if you think there's little gaps, like you see I've done there. So don't feel like you have to ever unpick anything. You can always just stitch over pieces right at the end. So you can see how I finished the thread here. I'm just running it underneath a few stitches at the back. I'm just going to tie it off and then trim it. There's no need to tie a knot. So just to let you get a little bit of a longer run, I'll show you then stitching a few more of these, and then we'll go on to add on our chain stitch. So once you've got a lot of those leaves stitched, then you're going to go around and add a line of chain stitch underneath, and this really neatens them off. So I'm adding my chain stitch here using the link method. There's a few different ways of stitching chain stitch, but I find this one the best one. You'll find a separate video for this on the how-to section, showing you how to stitch the chain stitch in a link method. But if you look closely, you'll be able to see what I'm doing here, and I'll show you a little bit zoomed in so you can see how I'm doing the chain stitch. So here you'll be able to see it in more detail, showing you how the chain stitch works. So you could either stitch the entire border of the piece first, or stitch a section of border then go on to do some of the central design. And I tend to dart around a bit because I just find it more fun to do little bits of every area. And this is all about making it as engaging for yourself as possible. But really the border is as simple as that. So we're now going to go on to stitching some of the central design. And largely the design is done just in a pure satin stitch. So really simple. You can see all these sections of the bird, the tree, the snake are all just in a satin stitch. So I'm going to show you here stitching on the snake. Now the one thing on this face is I'm going to cover over the eye. So you have a rough idea where you want the eye to be, but it's much easier to stitch the eye after over the top of your satin stitch. So you'll just watch me here for a while, stitching out sections of the snake using the satin stitch. So once you've got that first colour in, then I'm just going to go in and add a bit of the brighter blue underneath. Whenever you're doing satin stitch, the first colour will always look a little bit messy. When you add the second colour in, it will all neaten up. And all you want to do is make sure that you stitch right up to the previous section you filled in. So you see here, my needle is going to go right into the same hole that I came out of with my light blue. I'll show you that zoomed in a bit, so you can also see in detail exactly what I mean. And the final bit I'm just showing you here is how I stitch the tongue onto the stake. And that's just using these little straight stitches. So it's just a little finishing touch, but you can see here, I'll be doing the same sort of stitching when you stitch the feet of the bird, the crow. And then also just adding in the eye, just with a few short little stitches. Now the satin stitch really is that simple, and it's used to stitch all of the main elements of the tree, the bird, all these flowers. Now there's little lines of chain stitch which you can see going on along the trunk of the tree. They're just very simple lines, but what I'm going to show you here is where the chain stitch is used in a more complicated way in the tail of our crow. And that's just rows of chain stitch side by side for filling. So I'm going to start at the top of the tail. Just to flag, you can see I've got my hoop held in a stand here. I wouldn't usually stitch using a stand, but I'm just doing that in this scenario just to hold the hoop steady whilst we're videoing. So don't feel like you need one of these also. Again, I'm just using the link method here to stitch the tail. And I'm just working out from the outside edge first. Now the way I would do it would be to stitch the outside two edges of the shape first, because obviously it narrows in, so you're going to need fewer side-by-side rows of the chain stitch as you get close to the end. So you'll see that I'm going to stitch the outside edge and then work out how to fill in. So as I get right down to the tip, my two ends are close next to each other. I'm then going to start a new little chain of chain stitch right in between the two at the tightest point. So you see I'm putting in a little starter stitch and I'm starting my chain stitch again. And now keep going like that until I get down to the very end. You see how I work out until my final stitches are going down the center. And I just finished my thread off underneath in the way I've done with other stitches. So you would continue filling the tail in that exact manner. Now the final bit I want to show you on here is how to do the feathers, because it looks a lot more complicated than it really is. And this bit is all about the order you do the stitching in. So all I'm going to do to begin with is just put in some of these straight single lines coming out from that centre. And now I haven't marked these on the fabric for you because the last thing you want is to see lots of little white lines. But all you want to do is just space them relatively equally along the line so you see a little bit of a gap between the two. You see I'm just going back down the next side, and it doesn't matter if these feathers overlap between the two little neighbouring branches, that's totally fine. Now I'm going to go in over the top now and add a row of chain stitch down the centre. So you see how I've stitched that there. You're going to use the exact same method when it comes to the feathers on the top of the crow's head as well. You see that's chain stitch with a few short little stitches at the end of each one. And with all that, that's how you stitch up this design. I hope you see that it's not as complicated as it could look, and I really hope you enjoy stitching up this piece. If you want to look at framing options, then do take a look at our website where you'll see all the frames either pre-painted or for you to paint yourself.